Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 5 of the series. Chapter 67. The Dark King, Chapter 67. Kill. I like the chapter where he talked with Jenny. I liked the romance. What was your favorite chapter? Dudien looked at the direction of the beast. It was clear that they were at the ground floor. He had to climb up to leave the shaft. However, there were obstacles in the elevator shaft. Although, not far from him there is an open entrance as the elevator door had fallen down. He made up his mind. He walked towards the broken stone heap and began to climb. A lot of wound began to open up and dull pain covered his body as he climbed upwards. He didn't stop but adhered to climb. If he continues to stay here, his body will lose all its strength at some point and he will be left to death in this goddamn forgotten place. Soon, he climbed out of the elevator. Clouds of light scattered in the elevator shaft. There was dust in the air. One side of the walls and windows were all dilapidated, full of holes. Dudien looked at the direction of the beast. There was a pile of concrete there. On the side a twisted broken steel was exposed. Because of these stones crimping on it, the beast wouldn't be able to climb out. He was feeling lucky that his body had rolled after falling down, or else all the pile of stones would have fallen onto him. He had escaped the death. Half an hour later, Dudien had finally came out of the rubble of the building. There was still a feel of lingering fear as he looked back at the collapsed building. He hid behind the stones and looked around for a bit. There were no undeads around. He thought that the undeads should have been attracted by the collapse of the building. Most probably have come over here but haven't been able to sense him, so gradually scattered and left. Earlier he had wrapped a dark blue ball in his chest to stop the blood outflow. As he had slept over, it had caused his body temperature to decrease. Most probably because of this he was able to avoid sensors of the undeads. But at the moment, he had already taken out the dark blue ball and put into his pocket. He quietly went by a nearby shop. As everywhere else, this shop was covered with vegetation and moss. Dudien's eyes fell on a plant. He took out the dagger from his waist and cut it off. He looked to the juice that was dropping from the plant. It was transparent water. He felt hunger struck him again. He grabbed few pieces of leaves from the plant and gently chewed them. There was a slight sweetness that filled his mouth. He quickly ate a few slices of rough leaves. But he was aware that the leaves may be contaminated with germs or their radiation content may be too high. After eating the leaves, Dudien felt the burning sensation in the stomach suddenly went down. He didn't continue to eat the leaves but cut the plant from the stem. He sucked the water out. If the vegetation was able to thrive and survive in a place such as this, then it was an indication that it already had anti-radiation and antivirus properties. After drinking some water, Dudien felt a bit more comfortable. Suddenly he thought of the beast that was stuck in the elevator shaft. A trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. He was the culprit that forced the beast into such a situation. As long as it didn't die, there was a possibility of breaking out. Once it broke out, it will be very dangerous for Dudien in the future. Thinking for a moment, Dudien came towards the scrapped cars that were covered with moss. The front cover was knocked out. The engine was unusable and corroded. He didn't use much effort to take out the gas tank. There was nothing inside as he checked the gas tank with a dry stick. It was an expected result. But he didn't give up and began to gently scrap tank from inside with the stick. Soon there was a layer of swarthy material on the stick. He took out the fire sickle and ignited the dark material. It actually burned. Dudien was surprised. He went to the other cars and pulled out the gas tanks from all of them. He scrapped inside and gathered a large amount of swarthy material. Dudien went to the shops and small supermarkets that were close by. He found fabric and clothes. He picked as much as he could and crawled back into the collapsed building. It didn't take long before he was in front of the elevator shaft. He was tired and exhausted. He sat by the elevator shaft and rested for a while. He lit the torch. This time he saw everything more clearly. The beast was covered in pile of stones. Only its neck, head, and half of its forepaw was exposed. Dudian sneered as he stirred the dark oil material, rolled it in the combustible fabrics and wood. Later on he threw them toward Beast. The beast suddenly woke up and opened its eyes as these things knocked onto its face. It growled and grimaced in pain. Dudian smiled slightly and threw the torch down. Torch fall on top of the fabric and fire burned up. Roar. The beast body came in contact with the fire. It began to roar up in pain. Its head was violently shaking. Stones slightly loosened because of its movement. Lots of gravel rolled down. However, it failed in its struggle to move, and shaking the stones didn't help much. Dudian was completely assured down in his heart as he saw the scene. He was worried that the beast will suffer pain and in madness would use extra force to get out. But after all, the building had collapsed and it happened to be at the bottom. It had suffered a great deal of damage, also lost a lot of blood. The fire illuminated the dark elevator shaft. The beast's struggling roars gradually dissipated with the flames. Dudian quietly looked at it. He felt that the life was so fragile. Even such a strong monster couldn't escape the clutches of death. Perhaps. No. It should only blame itself as it was not strong enough, right? Dudian slightly clenched his fists. The ambitions in his heart grew as the flames burned and growled more and more. The flames continued to burn for 10 minutes. Gradually they were extinguished. The smell of a cooked meat surged with the hot air. He didn't know that how smart the monster was. Maybe it could play dead too. So for insurance, he picked up a stone and threw it. Stone hit the beast but it did not respond. Dudian was relieved. He went down and closely looked at the charred body of the beast. Its body surface was burned. Blood was spilling out. It seems that this beast is really different from the undeads. Its head does not have to be cut off to kill it. Many thoughts passed by Dudian's mind. I'm just interested. Is its head different from the undead's? Cold light glowed in Dudian's eyes as he held the dagger. Chapter 68. The Dark King, Chapter 68. Infection. Suddenly, Dudian thought of a matter that he'd totally forgotten about. While he was stuck in the elevator shaft, his body below his butt had been covered in blood which was flowing there. The blood of the beast. Does it contain the virus? The armor should have isolated it. I have not been in contact with it, He quickly stood up but his legs were numb. At the same time more and more tingling feelings came from all parts of his body. He clenched his teeth and dragged his body outside to remove the blood. He came up towards the wall which he had used before to climb up. The beast's blood hadn't flown here. He leaned against the wall while slightly breathing. He looked down at his body and checked his armor from behind. He didn't know when it had happened but there were quite a few scratches. The blood had penetrated and infected his body using mostly those scratches. He hadn't felt anything until he had seen the scratches. Like a leech it had already penetrated his body. He didn't even feel its existence when he touched the blood on his skin. Dudian's face turned pale and there was a trace of regret in his heart. If he didn't come back to kill the beast, perhaps he wouldn't be infected. Although nobody would expect me to escape the hunter, but I even managed to escape the beast's attack. Eventually I couldn't escape the retribution of the heavens, Dudian bitterly thought in his heart. People would often talk about karma and they would say, forgive and forget. Perhaps if he didn't come back to kill the beast it would starve to death in here. But now he will be buried in here with the beast. Dudian was leaning against the wall. Body's sharp tingling made him shiver and unable to climb up. He hoped that this virus won't take his life. He could only hope at this point. In addition to tingling, he felt his consciousness get blurred and dizzy. He slightly lifted his left hand and touched his forehead. He felt hot and could not help but feel despair. He thought of himself using the dark blue ball to absorb the heat before getting into the coma. He used his left hand and struggled to take out the dark blue ball from his pocket. He used his hand and affixed the dark blue ball to his forehead. Immediately an icy feeling enveloped him. He was able to think a bit clearer. However, his eyelids felt heave and his eyesight became gloomy and extremely fuzzy. Suddenly, he felt a slight movement from his chest, as if there was something struggling in there. He looked down and used his left hand to slightly open the armor. His vision was blurred but he could still see small blood-red worms. The gauze was wrapped around his chest. But there were worms that were drilling into the gauze. His muscles contracted in peristaltic wave to defy the worms. But most of them had drilled almost half the way in. Worms, worms, Dudien's mind at a loss. He raised his hand to grab, but a burning sensation hit his brain. He couldn't even lift his hand. Before he closed his eyes, the last thing that he saw was that the worms finally managed to fully drill into his body. Thump. Dudien's head fall onto ground. He was thoroughly unconscious. His palm was still holding the dark blue wall even though he was in coma. Gradually this dark blue ball melted in his hand. It turned into a light blue transparent liquid which penetrated into his palm through the small wounds. Darkness. He was not aware of the passage of time. Dudien once again opened his eyes and his consciousness was restored. He woke up because of hunger. He was at a loss as he saw the familiar picture of the elevator shaft in front of him. Didn't I die, he thought. He immediately thought of high fever he had felt before losing the awareness. He touched his head. Body temperature seemed normal. Then he noticed that his swollen palms had been restored. He quickly sat up and checked his whole body. There was no kind of visibly external change in the body. His soft armor was dusty and there were a lot of small scratches. He subconsciously looked back at the beast. He saw its charred body still stuck under the pile of stones while its head was cut off. Dudien speculated, was I lucid dreaming because of the high fever? Was I so tired that I had slept after cutting of the beast's head? Suddenly, he opened his eyes wide in astonishment as he looked around. Chapter 69. The Dark King. Chapter 69. Fusion. It's so dark. I can actually see as if it was day. Dudien patted his face so that he could feel a little pain. He wanted to make sure that he was not dreaming. He turned to look up but there was no light coming from up. The elevator shaft was still enveloped in darkness. However, he could see everything very clearly on the ground. Dudien blinked his eyes quite a few times before he remembered about the worm stuck onto his chest. All the hair on his body stood erect at the thought of worms. He opened his chest in a hurry. The white gauze was still rolled and the blood had penetrated it, coloring it red. Moreover, blood had dried up. Dudien gently touched the wound but didn't feel any pain. He immediately uncovered the gauze. After he peeled off the gauze he saw the scar on his chest. It was a vertical dagger scar which was completely healed, leaving only a shallow white scar. In addition, there was half of a finger-sized blood vessel which was solidified outside the skin. Dudien's face changed as he gently touched to bloodstains. Those worms haven't actually drilled into my body, right? Right, he panicked as he remembered the worms. Anyone who would be willing for an unknown worms to drill into their body would be a creep. Dudien thought of his dagger and immediately picked it up. He suspected that the worms might have sojourned in the bloodstains. Dagger gently pierced the blood vessel like tissue from which the dark red blood flew. At the same time, Dudien felt an immense pain which passed into his brain. His body trembled, especially the left side of the heart felt most painful. This was a real heartache. His hand shook and he immediately stopped piercing. He felt that if he continued it would lead to his death. As he released the dagger, that pain was relieved a bit. He looked and saw that the scratched blood vessels were healed in an instant. Actually, the speed of healing was visible to the naked eye. It didn't long before they were back in their original state. Only small amount of blood that was on his chest proved that there was a stab over there. The pain that he had felt before gradually subsided as the blood vessel healed. Dudien's face turned ugly. Have they fused with my body? Did I just become one with a worm? Ultimately, he couldn't find courage to continue to pierce the blood vessels. He thought that if he could find a microscope in the ruins or based on Superchip's knowledge create one for himself, then he could find the source of the changes on his body. For now he had to place it aside. This feeling made him a little uncomfortable, but helpless. However, the thought of survival was in itself a great fortune. My eyes can penetrate the darkness. Most probably each of those worms had some kind of functionality. They are not worms. It's beyond the concept of virus, bacteria, or worm. It is a new variation of the microorganisms. It can live in the other life form's blood. Dudien calmed himself as he began to rationally think about everything before the coma. Obviously this bloody worm was from the blood of the beast. Perhaps it was living with it, but after it died they followed out with the blood out of their own to find the new host. This also explained why he turned out differently after the infection by the blood. If it was another virus infection he would turn into an undead, which didn't happen. Moreover, there had to be large number of worms inside the beast's blood. Most probably it has been long ago that these worms has produced antibodies to protect themselves from the virus and enhance their resistance towards it. They wouldn't want to be corrupted by it as they are a different life form. Nevertheless, he understood that it was only his speculation. Unless he had the right equipment to research it, he would never ever understand what was really going on. Dudian looked at his hands and feet. He didn't feel anything strange. He wanted to climb up from here. He used a bit of force to jump to catch onto a stone when he suddenly felt as light as a feather. In a single jump he had already reached the top of pile of rocks outside the hole. Dudian was stunned. Once again he looked at his hands and feet. He thought of something, so he bent over to a half-meter large stone. He held with hands and gently picked it up. Sure enough, it gently bounced up. He made a swing and was already 3 to 4 meters high. And he knew that he didn't use full force. 3 or 4 meters high was not where his head reached, but the soles of his feet. It was way beyond the ordinary human's physical capabilities. Even if you had gone through an extreme hard training for decades, you may not be able to achieve such a non-human result. Sure enough, the speed, the power, everything had improved. My eyesight is over the top and I can see in the darkness. But the most powerful change of all is the smell. Dudian lightly fell. He closed his eyes to concentrate. Dudian could feel different smell float into his nose. As he had closed his eyes, he was able to exude variety of things because of their smells. He was like a radar. He could smell the source and could determine the distance. Even if his eyes were closed, with the smell alone he also knew the surrounding environment. Dudian opened his eyes. His heart was in shock. This smell enhance was godlike power. He felt as if he was a hound. Enhancement of the sense of the smell is completely out of proportion with the other physical improvements. There is just way too much difference. The previous beast also had very strong sense of smell. Could it be that this worms had brought some of the beast's capabilities into my body? Dudian was startled. He felt very excited. This sense of smell was a super radar for him. He could smell the undeads and other monsters from the distance. It was a life-saving gift. Dudian's confidence suddenly burst out by the addition of this super sense of smell. Now he was assured that he would be able to kill ordinary undeads at a whim. And the monsters as horrible as the previous beast, he would just perceive them in advance and avoid. Dudian was perceiving countless smells. He smelled something sweet that was distributed from the backpack. The location was 26 meters away, in front of the pile of stones. He grabbed the broken walls and jumped to the top of the building. Originally this place was the second floor. At the moment, all the things in the office were piled in the bottom. The body injury was healed, but he felt very hungry. Backpack had dry food and water, moreover dark blue balls were in it too. Thinking of the dark blue balls, he remembered that he was clutching onto one before he went into coma. When he woke up and he hadn't seen it. If it was on the ground he would have seen it for sure. What happened then? Dudian looked at his hands. His left palm was sticky. He was preoccupied with the bloodstains on his chest previously, so he hadn't noticed it. There was a layer of pale yellow sticky material on his palm. It exuded a stench taste. So what happened to the ball? When he thought of burning the undeads, he remembered that the dark blue ball melted in high temperatures. So because of his high fever, was the temperature so high that the dark blue ball melted? Chapter 70. The Dark King, Chapter 70. Release. It seems that it is the only explanation. Dudian thought. Could it be said that after its melt the dark blue ball could be absorbed by the body? Whether it is the worms or dark blue ball, are they able to enhance my physique? Perhaps he could get information out of people from Consortium after he gets back into the giant wall. He easily removed the accumulated stones and broken debris as his physical strength at the moment was enormous. He moved the heavy stones very easily. Following the smell he quickly found the backpacks hidden under the stones. The dry food and water container had crushed under the stone. Although he could still eat the food, but the water containers were dry. His hunger subsided as he ate the dry food. His physical strength seemed to recover as he ate. In addition, he found dark blue balls in another place. Also, he found hunter's bow and arrows. Dudian grabbed the bow. It was very heavy for a normal person to carry, but he could carry it with one hand and not feel tired at all. He gently pulled the bowstring. It was pulled for almost a meter length. Hunter's bow and arrows were not trivial but very lethal in nature. Although he could not take them back to the giant wall, but at least he could secretly use it outside. He took the bow, arrows and backpack, while inconspicuously left the collapsed building. I don't know where the mason and rest are. Dudian was in the middle of street. He looked at the position of the sun, it was already noon. He checked the place where he had separated with the mason and other two. He could smell them and immediately he followed the smell took him. The area No 8 was not safe and it was infested with undeads. Mason and the other two could face a dangerous situation at any time. Dudian was quickly following after the smell until he reached a track. Suddenly, the smell disappeared as he reached the street. Dudian could not help but be surprised for a moment and then wryly smiled. Did these three brats came up with their own methods and eliminated the body odors? At this time, the silence of the ruins was torn apart by the sudden bursts of undead growls and roars. Dudian quickly chased towards the source of the sounds. Soon he reached the street where the sounds originated. Through the corner of a house he checked the street. Around 7 or 8 people had gathered into a circular formation in front of a shop. The undeads were coming onto them from both sides of the street. Scott. Zach. Dudian identified them. They were Scott, Mia, and 4 consortium scavengers. Moreover, including Zach, there were another 2 newly graduated scavengers. At the moment, Zach and the other scavenger were protected by the team while they were staying in the middle of the formation. Scott and Mia were holding their daggers. However, Scott's face turned ugly as he checked the approaching undeads. With their skills they were barely able to single out one undead. They could manage to stand on their own maximum up to 2 undeads. But there were 6 or 7 undeads approaching them. There seemed to be more undeads attracted and coming over because of constant roars. Back, back. Scott whispered. They receded towards the shop. The first undead that reached them attacked Scott. Its hideous face made the 4 consortium scavengers behind Scott turn pale. Scott's hand slightly shivered while deflecting undead's claw attack. Scott roared, snarling and waving his dagger. Puff. His dagger had cut onto undead's back. But the blade was not sharp enough, so it got stuck in the cervical spine. Scott's face changed as he kicked. Mia was about to join him in support, but 2 more undeads rushed onto her. Mia turned around to block. She could stop one of them while the second passed by her and attacked the 4 consortium scavengers. The 4 consortium scavengers were extremely nervous and desperate. One of them waved his dagger to retort, but the undead grabbed onto his arm. It pulled the scavenger and bite onto Youth's throat. The blood sprayed onto undead's face, coloring it red. The other 3 scavengers shivered in fear as they continued to retreat. One of them even abandoned them to run away. The new scavenger boy, who was with Zach, stood there, his face anxious as he didn't know what to do. The undead who was bit in the scavenger looked at the boy near the Zach. Run! Scott snarled. Zach was pale but suddenly summoned all the courage and rushed up holding his dagger. As he was about to reach the undead, he bent his body and went for a roll. As he was about to stand up from the roll, he used the dagger and hit the undead's ankle. Thump. Undead's body tripped. Zach took the opportunity to get up and was about to stab the dagger onto undead's head when another roar echoed from behind. Zach's face paled as he saw that he was late to block the undead. But a stone flew over and hit the undead's head. It was knocked to the ground as it stopped movement. Scott, Mia, and Zach couldn't help but look towards the source of the stone. They saw a figure approaching quickly as he caught up with the undeads that were rushing over to them. As he reached the undead, he jumped and kicked onto undead's spine. The undead fell down and rolled, but he didn't stop and caught with it. Before the undead could stand up, that figure used his foot to hold it while hit it with double-edged fire axe on its head. Puff. The axe smashed undead's head. Scott, Mia, and Zach were shocked. The 3 consortium scavengers and the new recruit who had fled into the shop looked back. They were stunned at sight. Zack saw that the person who beheaded the undead was Dudien. Without losing a moment, Dudien ran towards Zack. The undead was about to stand up when he threw the axe. Puff! The axe slashed undead's head from back of its neck. However, it was not enough to kill the undead as it was struggling to stand up. Dudien took advantage of the time and chased over. He grabbed the haft of axe and swung it to cut undead's head off. Bang! The undead's head fall off while the axe's haft broke up. Dudien took a light breath. Fortunately, I caught up. He didn't use the hunter's bow to shoot because he didn't want to expose himself. When he saw Zack and the others surrounded, he immediately hid the hunter's bow and arrows under the chassis of a scrapped car. Moreover, he managed to grab axe from the fire hose box, fire protection cabinet. Unfortunately, the haft of the axe had decayed so badly that it broke after few swings. Dean, is that you? Scott was horrified at sight as Dudien had killed 2 undeads. Be careful. Dudien screamed as he grabbed the axe's head and threw it. Puff! The axe head like a metal brick smashed on the undead's chest, which was in front of the Scott. It knocked it down but didn't cause fatal injury. Scott recovered, hastily stabbed the dagger onto undead's head. Dudien said to Zack, "Hide inside." He grabbed the dagger of the youth who was bitten by the undead. He turned towards Mia and threw the dagger. It stabbed onto undead's head, which was fighting with Mia. The dagger pierced undead from its jaw and thrust into its skull. Undead made sounds twice and fell down. "Thank you," said Mia to Dudien as she curiously glanced at him. Power shown by him was not on scavenger level, but she knew that they were in a critical situation, so she didn't have time to ask. Chapter 71. The Dark King, Chapter 71. Return. Expect the unexpected. We may hit hard again with bunch of chapters. It all for now though, but who knows what may happen in next 6 to 7 hours. Puff. Puff. Dudien, with the help from Scott and Mia, quickly killed the few undeads that were coming over. He smelled the odors of distant undeads, so he said, "This place is not safe and we should not stay for long. We have to leave as soon as possible." Scott knew that sounds of fighting will lead the other undeads over. So he refused to take a break. He picked up few sheepskin scrolls from his backpack and opened them one by one to find the map and determine their current location. It's no longer safe in Area No. 8. We have to go back to Area Number 9, he said to Dudien, and rest. Dudien nodded in agreement and raised his hands to call Zack and rest. Zacky ran quickly as he was pleasantly surprised. "I knew you will survive." He wanted to ask many questions. As he saw Dudien blinking his eyes, he stopped, but there was a wide smile on his face. 3 consortium scavengers and the new recruit saw that the danger had gone, so they followed Zack out together. The new scavenger recruit from the training camp saw another scavenger's bloody dead body and his expression turned complex. Mia noticed their eyes as she spoke in disgusted tone. "Cowards. Previously, you should have taken the opportunity to kill the undead while it was biting onto his neck. Instead you run away in fear. You are not even as good as that child. Shameful." The child she referred to was Zack, who had turned back to fight earlier. 3 scavengers were ashamed as they clenched their teeth. They didn't dare to answer. The new boy, his head down, ran towards them. Secretly he glanced at Dudien. He wanted to say something, but changed his mind. Scott looked at them. He sighed and shook his head. "Let's go." Dudien nodded as he glanced at the surrounding environment. He secretly took note of the location so that he could come back later to take bow and dark blue balls. Everyone quietly followed Scott along the edge of the street. Dudien along the way maximized the benefits from his sensitive sense of smell to the utmost possible. As he would smell group of undeads, he would suggest Scott to take a detour. If there were 2 or 3, then he would kill them directly. Scott didn't dare to overlook Dudien because of his young age and youthful voice. He knew that something extraordinary had happened to Dudien. So Scott adopted each proposal given by Dudien about detour options. After half a day of travel, they finally got out of Area Number 8. They had taken detours at least for 10 times. Scott finally relaxed as they came into the Area Number 9. However, he didn't dare to stay near the border, so they continued to move forward. Scott was completely assured down as they came deep into the middle of Area Number 9. Inside the Area No. 9, they didn't meet any undeads. Even the monster rats were not present. In addition to broken stones, they didn't see anything of value through the broken shops of Area Number 9. At last, Scott breathed out in relief. He was not in a hurry as he sat in a clean place to rest. Mia put her backpack on the side over the gravel. She looked curiously at Dudien. You have just joined the scavenger group of Consortium. I have heard that you were the seed from the camp, so you got 2 blessings. Only, how you got so strong with 2 blessings? Were you supplied with anything else? Scott, 3 Consortium scavengers as well as the new scavenger recruit looked over. They had long been curious about the issue but were surrounded by the undeads. They were worried to speak because it could lead the undeads to them, so they held back their words. There was another reason that tempted the inquiry. But they held back because they were worried that it will result in Dudien's displeasure and he would abandon them in the Area Number 8. Dudien had already prepared an answer in advance. I was in coma. When I woke up, I felt my strength was much stronger than before. It was half side of the truth. Scott and Mia glanced at him in doubt. Suddenly, Mia spoke out the thing which all of them were worried to ask. You have not been bitten by the undead, right? 3 Consortium scavengers who were sitting next to Dudien immediately stood up and distanced themselves from him. Dudien was curious. If I was bitten by the undead, would not I become an undead? Scott's face turned ugly, but there are different speeds of turning into an undead based on the different injuries. If you are bitten on throat, chest and other parts, the effect of the infection will be instant. However, if you rub blood over the skin, then the speed of infection will be a lot slow. How long has it been that you have awakened from coma? Not long time. The slowest infection is usually 3 days. Scott looked at Dudien and said, that is if you are infected, in the next 2.5 days, you will completely turn into an undead. If there is not affected afterwards, then it shows that there was no infection. Dudien nodded slightly. He was aware that it was not an undead infection. However, after hearing what Scott had said, there was a bit of uneasiness in his heart. Is the worm counted as an infection? We have come out for 4 days. After 6 days we will return to the wall. Scott looked at Dudien in hesitation and said, we should separate for the time being. Dudien looked at them. Except the Zach who had a worried look, the rest had fear reflected in their eyes. It was normal as they were afraid that Dudien could turn into an undead. He couldn't help but smile and speak soft. It's all right, but I would like to borrow your map. I'm afraid I won't be able to find my way back after the separation. Okay. Scott did not hesitate and immediately agreed. Dudien looked back at Zach and said, I will go to look for Mason and Sham. You shouldn't be worried, nothing will happen to me. Just wait over here. Zach's eyes reddened as he clenched his teeth and said, blame me. We drag you behind, Dean. I'm sorry. What nonsense are you blabbering? We are brothers. Dudien laughed. Zach could not help but burst into tears and sob softly. Scott, Mia, and others were silent. Dudien took the map from the Scott and turned away. Dudien immediately ran at full speed and disappeared from Scott and Rest's sight. He went along the previous route back to Area Number 8. He killed the undeads which he met and collected the dark blue balls. It didn't take long before he reached the located where he had hidden bow and arrows. He took them and dark blue balls from the bottom of the chassis of the car and began to search for Mason and Sham's smell. Along the way he met few single undeads which he directly killed. Although his fighting skills were still immature, but with the speed and strength boost he was fully able to avoid undeads' attacks. However, in case he encountered more than 3 undeads at the same time he could do nothing but escape. After all, if he was surrounded and caught, then he would be injured one way or the other. This is horror of the undeads, even hunters would avoid to venture close to a group of undeads. 2 days later, Dudien finally found Mason's smell in a hidden ruin of a building. Actually, he tracked him down because of the smell of Mason's excrement. It also made Dudien to understand that in the wilderness should avoid going to toilet. In case he couldn't resist, he should bury it under soil and leave as soon as possible not to leave traces. Dudien brought Mason back to Area Number 9 and was about to return to 8th Area to search for Charm. But suddenly he smelled Sham's odor in Area Number 9. He was stunned. Following the smell, Dudien found Sham. He was alone, roaming in Area Number 9. Dudian didn't think that Shem would be able to go as far as getting himself back here. As he saw that all three of them were safe, a big boulder was taken from Dudian's heart. He returned to Area No. 8 to begin his undead hunting plan. In the blind of an eye, 4 days had gone by. Everyone came to the wall as the 10-day period had arrived. Chapter 72. Pastor's Blessing. 213, 214. In a remote office at Area No. 9, Dudian was counting the number of dark blue balls that he acquired. He had killed a total of 227 undeads in the last few days. Dudian wanted to apply the method Hunter tried to hunt the beast. In short, he had tried to use that approach to ambush the prey from the high ground. Although the undeads were attracted by the sound, but his archery skills sucked. Out of 10 shots, none would be successful. Occasional arrow that pierced the undead's head was a pure luck. As a result, Dudian decided to exercise his shooting skills for the next few nights. In 50 meters distance shoots of partial objects, after 3 days of series training, he was able to hit once in 2 shots. However, he used to practice on fixed objects and their size was too large. The initial rapid progress was normal, but further improvement needed a lot of practice. If he wanted to reach the apex of archery, he didn't know how much time it would take. After all, the undeads are moving. They don't just stay fixed on a place and wait for Dudian to hit them. Moreover, shooting the undead was not enough. He must accurately hit their heads. Although his physique was much stronger and adaptive than the average person's, but after a few days of continuous practice he could reluctantly show only slowly wandering undeads. Even in this case, on average 1 of 3 arrows would pierce undead's body. To hit their heads, he had to rely on nothing but luck. This made him painful. If he was able to master archery, then he was confident enough to kill at least 3 times more undeads. Dudian looked at the dark blue balls in his possession. He felt good because of his accomplishment, but they were a burden at the same time. After all, if he brought all these back to Consortium, there will be no small fluctuations. It should be alright if I brought only 7 of the dark blue balls. I can get to know their monetary value from Consortium's perspective too. Dudian hid the rest of the dark blue balls along with bow and arrows in the rubble. In order to decrease the chance of them to be found in the future, he hid them in Area No. 9. It has been scavenged thoroughly, so nobody would look for something valuable there. However, Area No. 8 was Consortium's target as the next major area to be scavenged. If he hid them in Area No. 8, there would be a possibility that they would be found. After taking lots of valuable things with him, Dudian began to walk towards the edge of the Area No. 9 along the direction of the map. The giant wall of Silva was faintly visible as Dudian was getting closer. He felt the charm of the giant wall. Actually, even if the previous beast came in front of this wall, it would look like a mayfly in comparison to it. If it tried to attack it, then it would be like mayfly trying to shake a giant tree. He could just make out the shape of the giant wall in the twilight. Scott looked at the sunset. He knew that the tunnel will be opened soon. He could not help but look at Mason. Zach and Sham, you said Dead is still alive. How come he is not here yet? The door will open in about 10 minutes. If he can't reach, he will have to wait until the next time it opens. Mason eagerly looked at the distance as he replied anxiously, he knows about the time. He should not delay his arrival. Mason looked at Sham, you said you saw him. It was 4 days ago, yeah. I am sure. Sham solemnly answered. He had heard from Zach about Dudian, but he didn't believe that Dudian will turn into an undead. Mason looked at him and said, I hope you are not lying. It won't be good for anyone. The iron gate propped up as if it was a steel mouth. A figure came out of the underground passage. It was Peter. Well, Peter had just come out. He saw Scott and others. How come? Isn't there anyone else? Scott was relieved after he saw Peter. The Area No. 8 had large number of undeads which had migrated from the other regions. He knew that so many undeads couldn't be overlooked by the hunters. Even if they wanted, they couldn't ignore them. Peter was startled a moment as he suddenly thought of something. I heard the boss say that there was a monster riot in one of the regions. I did not think that it would be near the Area No. 8. You guys sure are unlucky. His eyes swept over them and his face slightly changed. Where is Dean? He could have been infected by an undead. Scott hesitated, still telling his thoughts. Though Zach and others said that they had seen Dudien, but he did not believe it. Peter's face changed, sighed. I was very optimistic about him, did not think. Bale, you go ahead, the guards are waiting for you inside it. Scott nodded slightly. Along with Mia he went inside the passage. The other 3 scavengers and newly recruited scavenger followed. Mason and the other 2 stood still and didn't move. They anxiously looked at the distance. Peter knew that the 4 of them had graduated together and lived in the same dormitory. He stared quietly at the broad and desolate plains in front of him. Life is so fragile. He sighed slightly, looked a bit sad. A very pleasant voice echoed in surprise, it's him. Dean. Peter squinted his eyes and saw a black ball coming from afar. After it closed up the distance, he saw that Dudien was under the ball carrying it. Peter froze for a moment, he could not help but smile. Dudien saw that Mason, Peter, Zach and Shem were waiting for him in front of the entrance, so he accelerated the pace. I knew it. Damn it. I know you would overcome everything. Mason left his backpack and was the first to rush over at Dudien. Dudien smiled. Mason, have I ever told you that you look like a girl when you run? Me. You little prick. Your skin color was so white that even the girl were jealous when you joined the training camp. Mason laughed out loud. Dudien's face changed to a supercilious look as he came close to Peter. Peter smiled. It seems you had a great harvest. Go in, the door will be closed in 6 minutes. Dudien nodded slightly and went into the passage. Mason, Zach and Shem also brought their backpacks and kept up with Dudien. It didn't take long when they saw Scott and the others stopped in the middle of the passage. Moreover, there were 12 or so people with Holy Church's badges. Dean. Scott and others were shocked as they saw Dudien. Dudien looked at the guards and said, "Who are they?" Scott recovered, thought of Mason for a moment. Then he understood that Dudien was not infected. Because in the last 6 days, even if there was a slight blood rubbed on his skin, he would have turned into an undead. They are guards from the Holy Church. It's a routine check. Each time when we return, they are here to light our armor and things that we have collected. Everything has to be transported to the Holy Church in light by the blessing of the priests. It's for the purification of virus and plague. Scott explained. Chapter 73. The Dark King, Chapter 73. Cleaning days. Dudien nodded in understanding. He was not surprised as the concentration of radiation is too high outside the wall. The items that were recovered were full of bacteria and thick radiation. Naturally had go through a cleanup. But what he cared about was the institution responsible for this work turned out to be the Holy Church. Your items. Church's guard in his early 20s said to Dudien, and your name? Name is Dean. These are my goods. Dudien gave them the large fabric that had covered everything he had collected. The young guard beckoned to the companion who was next to him to pick up Dudien's huge collection. There was a white mask on his face. He continued, good enough, but you shouldn't scrap all the rotten copper and iron. It was put onto a carriage. There was a woman guard which tore off a note that had Dudien's name on it, and posted it above his luggage. Next, the young guard waved. Dudien thought for a moment and took out dark blue balls from his pocket. I have picked up these too. Do I have to give them? Young guard was stunned at sight. He looked up and down at Dudien. Little guy, where did you pick up these? From the head of the undead, replied Dudien. The young guard stared at him and asked, why would you think about fumbling in undead's head? Out of curiosity, answered Dudien. The young guard stared into Dudien's eyes. The latter looked back without a blink. I shall take it. No value though, your consortium will naturally inform you. Then, meaningfully looked at Dudien and took the 7 dark blue balls. Dudien saw pity and indifference in guard's eyes. Peter had come out from the passage. Everyone had given the materials that they had collected. So he waved and said, everyone onto the carriages. Dean. Scott opened the curtain of a black carriage and waved to Dudien, come here. Dudien saw his invitation but didn't refuse. He set foot onto the carriage where they were. He was sitting in the spacious carriage with Mia and another new boy. The 3 consortium scavengers rode in another carriage. We have wronged you. Scott apologized as the carriage ride away. Dudien shook his head slightly. I don't blame you. It's in humans' nature to take a preservative and cautious stand when facing the unknown. Scott was relieved at Dudien's words. Well, this time you are our savior. After the cleaning days are over, I'm going to take you out for a meal. Scott stopped for a moment. Your age is too small, so I can't take you to those colorful places. You know what I mean. Scott blinked. Well, if you are in trouble or don't understand anything, if it's within my powers, I will help you out. There was a solemn expression on his face as he spoke. Obviously everything he said came from his heart. Dudien smiled. In the beginning, Scott and Mia had tried to help the scavengers when they were attacked by the undead. They could have left easily, but they didn't. Just this was enough for Dudien to feel admiration for them. After all, Dudien had experienced the life and death situation. He was very clear how people would despair while facing the death. They would do evil things just for another breath. Suppressing those evil thoughts could be done by people who had good nature. Dudien admired them. What are these cleaning days? Dudien was curious. Scott patted his head, smiled and said, Oh, I have forgot to tell you guys. Fortunately, that guy Peter does not know or will nag me to death. He sighed. Shaking his head slightly, Scott continued, Cleaning days refer to the 3-day period where our bodies are carefully examined before we can enter the living area of the giant wall. If the person is infected, it would take 3 days for the virus to turn them into an undead at the longest time. If in these 3 days you don't turn onto an undead, then it proves that your body doesn't carry the virus and you can return to the living area. Dudien realized. Indeed. It's all right for the undeads and the beast to roam outside the giant wall. But once the virus infiltrates inside the wall, the results would be much more terrible. There would be no time to identify one by one who is bitten by the undead. The whole area may get infected. Suddenly, Dudien thought of the walls of the boundary between the commercial and residential areas, the slums, the towering walls and gates. Perhaps it's more than just the distinction between the rich and the poor. Originally it was meant to divide the living area into many regions, so in case of a virus spreads inside, it wouldn't penetrate the whole population. But it could infect the region. At this time, Scott asked curiously, Dean, why your strength became so strong? You only get 2 blessings, but your strength is stronger than me. By the way, I had 19 blessings. Sitting next to him, Mia and the new boy were also curious. Dudien saw that they have not forgotten about his super strength. There was a bit of frustration in his heart. Sure enough, people's curiosity couldn't be satisfied, it would never fade. The air is still in the wall, said Dudien. I didn't get it, Scott said. Mia cannot help smile. Dudien was embarrassed. I really do not know. I was unconscious. When I woke up I was like this. Well, Scott saw that he couldn't get anything out of him, so he gave up. Their carriages reached somewhere in the outskirts of the commercial district. This place was at the edge of the living area. But the radiation in the air was a lot thinner. Actually, radiation levels were almost same with the residential area, but it was sparsely populated. The reason was that it was forbidden area. There were old trees on both sides of the street. There were few castles on several hillsides. Dudien's carriage stopped in front of one of those castles. They gradually got off. The guards opened the castle doors as they got off the carriage. Nearly 3-meter-high dark red horse came out of the castle. It had an aggressive aura. A young knight of light was sitting on the horse. He didn't wear a helmet. He had long green hair which was loose on his shoulders. In short, he was handsome. He glanced at Dudien. Scott and Rest, come with me. Scott respectfully nodded. While he was the first to follow after the horse with Mia. Dudien and Rest followed behind them. Knights of Light belonged to Holy Church. They were much more nobler than the average knight. If a Knight of Light emerged from an aristocratic family, it would honor them in front of the other noble families. It would dignify the family and give them face. In addition to the glory of the identity, the Knights of Lights were very powerful beyond doubt. Their main aim was to destroy alchemists, potion masters and puppet masters who indulged in evil experiments. Ordinary knight would need to dismount and salute if they were to see a Knight of Light. The crowd followed the Knight of Light into the basement of the castle. Everyone should get into room. There is everything that you need for 3 days. Moreover, there is Book of Light provided to each of you. It's best to see more. Even if the body is not contaminated, you can purify your hearts. Green-haired youth indifferently said. Yes, Knight. Scott respectful nodded as he was already familiar with the rules in here. The small room in the basement seemed somewhat like a cell. It was made of rough iron pillars. There was a bed, wooden toilet, and a clean little table. On each table there was silver-colored book with golden color. Chapter 74. The Dark King, Chapter 74. News. You. Come with me, young Nye of Light pointed to Mia who was in the crowd. Mia seemed to be knowledgeable about where to go, so she nodded respectfully. Mason's curiosity was inflated as Mia followed the Knight of Light and left. Where is she going? How come she is not staying with us? Scott laughed. How to join us? She is a woman and has to stay on the other side in ladies' room. She would be taking shower and changing clothes, so women has different quarters. Mason's face turned red as he heard Scott talk. Okay. We should take shower and clean our bodies. It won't take long before they come over to check our bodies. Scott said as he took off his black uniform stained with blood. He went towards the shower besides the toilet to wash his body. It was a communal shower. People avoided in this era to have showers, but as they had come back from the outside of the giant wall, so they had to go through the process. Mason and the other two also took off their uniform and began to clean their bodies. As a result of 10 days of activities, the body sweat had become sticky and uncomfortable. There were bursts of smell coming out. Dudien's character was more introverted, which was contradictory to his social skills. He had rolled up bad sheets as curtains and hang as a shelter. Afterwards he began to take off his uniform and began to bath. Dudien would secretly sigh each time he took bath. There were no shower gels which he was used to. Look at Dean. He covered everywhere again. We are all men. What's the point of covering? At times, I wonder if Dean is not a girl. Mason and the other two were booing and laughing as they showered. Dudien put his head out of the curtain and fiercely said, Mason, you talk a lot of nonsense. I will tell Bayway that you secret painted her portrait. Zach, do you remember the time when you took the money? Sham, if you continue with this bullshit, I'm going to ruin your tavern. All three of them stopped instantly. Scott laughed. At the same time, in a secret cast in the commercial district, a black crow flew into the castle through the window on the second floor. There was an envelope attached to its claw. The room was very luxurious and spacious. Long carpet covered the floor. There was a large red wooden desk in the middle of the room. Fat, middle-aged man leaned against the chair behind the desk. He was playing around with pencil when the envelope fell onto the table. He frowned slightly. He tore apart the envelope and took the letter. Faint but dense aroma struck his nose as he read the letter. As he reached the last paragraph of the letter, his face changed. Brian did not come back. How is that possible? He was meant to be a supporting character on the battlefield. How the hell he didn't come back? He stared at the stationery as there was uncertainty in his face. The consortium sets time to hunters and scavengers that they tasks. The consequences of the violation is extremely serious. If they don't come back on time, then there is 70% probability that they are dead. The remaining 30% is likely that they are at the edge of death, trapped, or have encountered with a temporary crisis and failed to return in time. However, Brian's situation was different. Because he was not meant to be hunting in the gray area. He was responsible for finishing work at the border. It was a low-risk factor task. If he didn't come back on time, then the possibility of the death was high. His hands were trembling as he held the letter while there was anger in his heart. He was responsible for Brian as a hunter. If Brian was dead, then his position in the consortium will also be impacted. His earning would fall a lot too. If you haven't followed the directions and entered the gray area, then no wonder that you have come back. I won't be able to bear the responsibility, he murmured. However, if Brian's body is found in area number 8, it would mean that he was killed by the hunters of other consortia who had sneaked into our territory. That would be our consortium's intelligence problem. He immediately raised the quill pen and rapidly began to write the command to be passed out. The matter have to be investigated thoroughly. After all, even though Melon Consortium was big enough to bear loss of a hunter, but it was not a trivial matter. Such a strange loss may be related to intelligence loopholes or a spy had infiltrated their consortium. Commercial District. Mellon Foundation Scavengers Headquarters. 2 pieces of information quickly were passed. The first floor of the headquarters building was responsible for receiving and processing basic information. The second floor was meant for the administration and management dealing with important things related to scavengers. At the moment, 2 pieces of information were sent to a spacious office in the second floor. Information from the Hunter headquarters. Bearded, 40-years-old middle-aged man dressed in a suit whispered as he the information on his desk. Once upon a time he was a housekeeper of Mel family. But as he earned Mel family head's respect and love he was deployed here to manage scavengers. However, the identity of the man was more greater right now. A hunter didn't come back from the area number 8. Strange, wasn't the area number 8 cleaned? Only a few undeads would be roaming around. How could a hunter can't come back? Middle-aged man stared at the stationery and then frowned. It seems these pricks want to blame us and use as a scapegoat. He had operated scavengers headquarters for more than 10 years. He immediately figured out the meaning behind the words. His face was a bit gloomy. If a spy was detected within scavengers, then the scavenger headquarters staff would suffer a backlash or even punished badly. There was no indispensable man. He also felt helpless, as loss of a hunter couldn't be compared to hundreds of scavengers who couldn't make up to come back on time. The middle-aged man sighed and put the letter aside. He opened the second envelope. There was not much written and the content was very brief, describing everything. He was startled. Someone turned over cold crystals. Dean, this name. Isn't he the seed of the scavenger training camp? Suddenly he laughed out loud. This little guy. Quite smart. He is really the seed of the special training. It is worth for Consortium to invest vigorous capital to cultivate him. His previous depressed mood instantly changed. Originally, recruiting Dudien was a happy event for scavenger headquarters. Because they had gone through Dudien's resume. His body radiation level was very low. Although not a light physique, but there was a glimmer of hope for him to become a hunter. Only, they were not willing to invest capital into his training. After this, they would. If Dudien becomes a hunter in the future, it would be a feat written under his name too. He put the letter on top of the previous one. If the cold crystals were picked up by Consortium scavengers, then he would associate it with the death of Hunter. Maybe they would even go for a deep investigation. But now the object was Dudien, so he dismissed the idea. First reason he did so because Dudien graduated from the regular scavenger training, but also he was the seed object. No consortium would be stupid enough to send a person with such a potential to become a spy. Secondly, from the beginning, all consortiums and military were prohibited from contacting scavengers while in special training. Therefore, after the graduation the consortiums could only tempt the graduates by coming up with benefits. But they couldn't contact them privately. No consortium would break the rules. Therefore, the only possible group where spies lurked could be the scavengers cultivated by the consortium. The rules were more slack while the consortium itself trained them. Chapter 75. The Dark King, Chapter 75. Magic Marks. Hopefully, there will more chapters later on. In a few days, we will be posting our manifesto. If you don't know what radiometer is, check Chapter 7. Dudien and the rest had already cleaned themselves and put on clothes. He was sitting on the bed and chatting with Mason. The basement's door was pushed open as a team of people came in. There were 6 people. 4 guards from the church were escorting 2 people who were wearing white gowns. They had white masks on their face and were carrying their own medical boxes. Everyone is ready to be examined. Strip your clothes. One of the guards shouted. Scott has repeatedly experienced this beforehand. So he took them off as they were ordered. Mason and Dudien, who saw Scott, followed him by taking off their clothes one by one. Fortunately, both of the doctors were men. Or else they would be shy and embarrassed by being naked in front of the opposite sex. Turn to sides. Well, turn around. Doctors stood outside the iron cage and inspected them one by one. Dudien and others followed their orders and turned their bodies according to doctor's orders. What is this injury? The doctor asked as he pointed to the scar on Mason's back. Mason quickly answered, it is a scratch that happened because of friction when moving things. It's been there for a long time. The doctor nodded as he carefully looked at the scar. Later he made a record in the book on his hand, scar at the back. Injury time, speculated to be more than 4 years. Determined that there is no infection. Finished, continue to look at the next one. Ha! Suddenly, another doctor shouted in fear while staring at blood-like red marks at Dudien's chest. He leaned to the iron pillar to look carefully. He was surprised as he said, "Magic marks." The other doctor who heard his words also froze for a moment and immediately turned to check. Dudien's heart moved. Magic marks? Do they know about this? Scott, who was next to Dudien, was stunned as he said, "Magic marks? Dean has magic marks." Dudien didn't think that Scott knew this thing. Looking at his appearance, Scott didn't seem to recognize the red marks on his chest. Most probably he had heard about magic marks thing but never saw any. Both doctors were staring at Dudien in amazement. How could you? You are a scavenger. How will you have magic marks? Dudien was also puzzled. What is the magic marks? Scott had already noticed the strange looks from both doctors. He heard Dudien's question and immediately said, "Dean, magic marks appear on hunters. It is the root cause why hunters are far stronger than scavengers. Magic marks grant exclusive powers to hunters. It is said that the variety of amazing abilities come with different magic marks. Some hunters can make metal corrode, while others can perceive everything in their perspective. All these capabilities are the result of magic marks." He looked at Dudien's chest and saw the blood-red tissues that were above it. "I did not expect that magic marks looks like this. Dean, you were born with magic marks, so no wonder your strength was so strong. You are a hunter." He looked at Dudien with full of envy, but he was not jealous. Because he knew that not everyone was blessed with magic marks. Dudien was stunned. The blood results aftermath, the worm's force drilling, are called magic marks. Every hunter has them. So, isn't he considered a true hunter now? Both doctors looked deeply at Dudien. One of them said, "Even though we don't know how the magic marks had appeared on your chest, but it should be related to your body. Is it all right if we test your body?" Dudien has long been worried about the hidden dangers of the worm, so he immediately agreed. "I'll be troubling you too. Do not bother. If the test results are as we expected and confirm you as a hunter, then you don't have to be polite with us." The attitude of the doctors were modest and there were smiles on their faces. Dudien suddenly realized the gap between hunters and scavengers. His heart was relieved too. Since the other hunters have magic marks too, then he would not stand out. As a result, there should not be any hidden dangers. Dudien put his arm out from the gap of the iron pillars to make it easier for doctors to do the checkup. One of the doctors pulled out a small glass from the medical box. It was the radiometer. Dudien understood that they want to test his body's radiation content. So he speculated that the hunters who had magic marks on them had radiation value lower than normal people was because of them. After all, the biggest difference between hunters and scavengers was their radiation value, not strength. Soon, the doctor extracted blood from Dudien's fingers and dropped onto radiometer for measurement. Dudien's vision was completely different from his original condition. He saw a small red line that slowly crawled up a bit but then softly slid down. This time he clearly saw that this red line was a hair-like worm. So each radiometer has such a worm inside. No wonder, in this era where technology was so behind, to measure the radiation content of human body they were using such mysterious small worms. Most of these worms, even the one that was used to check him in the hunter castle, could induce the radiation levels. Sulo. Both doctors responded at the same time because of radiometer's results. Both were surprised as they dawned over to see the exactly value of the radiation content. No wonder, there was a magic mark in his body. They secretly thought. However, they couldn't understand how come Dudien was allocated to Scavenger's group. Was it the error of the consortium? They didn't dare to think about the reasons. After all, this matter is decided on top and had nothing to do with them. As long as they did their job, they wouldn't be concerned with anything else. "Well, we'll submit the results," one of the doctors told Dudien politely. "You have a hunter's body. I believe in short time you will be promoted by the consortium. I would like to congratulate you in advance." Dudien saw the change in their attitudes. He was not used to something like that when people sucked up to him. But he thought that this is how the world works, so he didn't think it was hypocritical. He frankly answered, "Thank you too." Both of the doctors smiled, then turned to check the rest. After they recorded the details of the checkup, they left the basement with 4 guards. Unexpectedly, Dean, you even unwittingly became a hunter, Scott said to Dudien as the doctors and guards left. There was pleasant surprise reflected in his eyes. Moreover, it was a heaven-sent opportunity to be in close contact with a hunter. If he could get close to Dudien, then his future will be better than many. Moreover, as long as Dudien backed him up a bit in the future, his scavenging results would improve a lot. It was reality. It was the hunter's influence. Mason, Zach, and Shem were equally surprised to find out that Dudien was hunter. They were envious and happy for him. "We have a patron." "Ha ha." Mason laughed out loud. Zach said, "Did not expect that Dean would mysteriously become a hunter. I suspect that it was because of the coma." Shem added, "Dean has long been known as a seed of the training group. As long as he had good performance, sooner or later he would have the opportunity to become a hunter. I didn't think that he would become one, no. Still so young, I don't know what kind of reward the consortium will give to Dean." They were excited. Dudien looked at their happy faces. He touched his chest. It seems that the hunter tried to ambush the beast mostly for the worms. However, if that hunter had magic marks, then why would he be after it? Could it be that even if you have magic marks, you can use others to enhance or increase your abilities? Speaking of ability, he thought of his super smell. This should be his magic mark exclusive ability. Dudien thought of Scott's words and asked him, "Do you know what the hunter's magic marks are? What are their general ability? Would it be threat to me?" Scott scratched his head in ignorance. "I only know few things. I heard that there are a wide variety of abilities. It shouldn't be a threat to you. To tell the truth, I don't know much. After you are promoted to a hunter status by the consortium, someone will inform you about specifics." Dudien thought the same way. Chapter 76. The Dark King, Chapter 76. Investigations. Outside the giant wall of Silva. Area number 8 belonging to Melon Consortium. Red flag of Melon Consortium was inserted on area number 8's edge, marking that it belonged to them. 3 figures rapidly passed by the flag. A breeze occurred because of their speed, which made the flag wave in air. They were extremely fast, as if they were not humans but 3 black cheetahs. They flexibly jumped through the broken ruins of the street. Occasionally large walls of buildings would block their movement, but they would gently step on rocks and climb over as if no terrain or barrier could block them. Soon, they meet 2 aimlessly wandering undeads. Their clothes were tattered into fragments which hang over. Their gray skin was revealed. Delicate woman with a scarlet red hair was leading the group of 3. She didn't reduce her speed at all because of the undeads. Instead, her speed rapidly increased. Before undeads could react, she was already in front of them. The next moment, she was standing in the middle of 2 undeads. Thump. Thump. Heads of undeads fall to the ground, rolled out as they came to stop. 2 figures who were following the woman followed her. The wind created by their speed blew over the heads of undeads. There are still undeads in here. Area number 8 was really upturned. Youth on the left looked back as his face slightly changed. The youth on the right had a worried expression as he looked at woman in front. He sighed and said, "I wish to have fun. Do not distract." The woman with the scarlet red hair yelled, "Gale, do you smell my brother?" The youth on the left replied, "No." "Hey." Suddenly he stopped and looked at the right side of the street as if he was scared of something. He spoke in an alarming tone, "This smell. Is it a beast?" Woman suddenly stopped, looking back at him. Gale's eyes flashed for a moment as he said, "Come with me. Maybe your brother is here." He ran along the street. Soon, all 3 of them came to the front of a collapsed building. Gale concentrated for some time and then went towards a hole. The woman and the other youth followed him into the hole and passed through a passage. Gale stopped inside the passage and looked towards the source of buzzing sound which he heard. There was a slight voice coming from the darkness. He raised his hand and lit a wax. Dark corridor was illuminated. Their faces changed at the sight. It really is a level 9 beast. Gale breathed lightly as if scared. The other youth mysteriously spoke, a rare monster such as this would appear in area number 8 and actually died in here. Woman carefully looked into his eyes and spoke in a cold tone, it was burned alive. Useless death. Gale regained his consciousness. He was afraid as he saw the beast, as he suddenly said, "You see, only its head was cut open. We all know that their brains are useless. Moreover, those special body parts were not removed. It seems whoever killed the beast was likely a novice hunter. There are no new hunters who had joined our consortium," the other youth said. Woman sneered, "It shows that the hunters from another consortium broke the rules and entered our region. Moreover, they have caused quite a chaos." Gale slightly nodded. Suddenly he twitched his nose as he said, "I seem to sense the smell of your brother." Ah. Woman's eyebrows lifted the same moment. Gale's face became a bit ugly. It's emitted from the beast's body. "I hope." Woman's tone instantly changed. "Stop blabbering nonsense." Gale, holding the flame, went towards the burned body of the beast. The smell was coming from the gap of its claw where a finger-thick piece of uniform was stuck. "This." Gale took out the fragment of the uniform. "This is your brother's." Woman's face changed as her dark pupils gently contracted. Color of her pupils somewhat changed to blood red. She was trembling as she slowly came to the front of Gale. She got stunned while looking at the soft fragment of the uniform in Gale's hand. She was aware that Gale's tracking ability by smell was never wrong. Moreover, she also understood that if her brother was caught in the beast's reach, there was no way for him to survive. She knew how everything would end. Animal, her arm's skin slowly shed as two blood-red machete-like weapons were exposed. She attacked the beast's neck and cut it off. Dead beast's body was already rotten and its muscle tissues were extremely fluffy. As she easily cut it off, the rotten blood sputtered onto her face. Blood splashed over bloodthirsty insects which were already eating up the monster's carcass. Herd of beasts, she was not worried about the insects or bacteria which could infect her body. Gale and the other youth had complex expressions on their faces. They didn't stop her because they thought it was useless. The woman's face was ferocious as she cleaned the stone rubble from the beast's body. They ripped of the beast's body and tore out the stomach. There was extremely thick rotten smell in the air because of her actions. She took out few digested bone remnants and metal pieces from the beast's body. "Beasts, beasts," Scarlet Woman repeated the same word. She was in grief, so she couldn't think about words to express her feelings. Gale couldn't bear any more as she pulled her back. "Be sensible. It is possible that Brian had run away from its claws and he is alive somewhere. Get the fuck away." Woman spoke in a cold tone. Gale sighed and released her. She tightly clenched her palms into fists. Her beautiful face was full of hideous expressions as she said, "I want to find the one who killed the beast. A damn rookie hunter. Most probably my brother had fought with it and wounded it. The bastard had killed the beast afterwards. I want to see that bastard dead. Do you understand me? I want to kill him." Gale nodded. "We will help you and certainly find that guy. The one who dared to violate the rules and get into our area. He shall not be forgiven." The other youth said, "It is impossible. That person hasn't left any clues in the vicinity. We should look for them. Perhaps we can find a lead." Gale slightly nodded and pointed back to the entrance of the elevator, the blood above. "It should be left by that man. I remember the smell. We could look around if there are no other clues in here." Woman noticed the place where Gale was pointing to. She jumped up and saw the stone where blood had been spilled. The next moment, horrifying scene happened. Black blood vessels looking like the roots of tree began to emerge from her white tender hand. They moved in circles and twists as they reached the stone and touched the top of the dry blood. It was as if they were licking the blood. Soon, the dried blood gradually disappeared from the top of the stones. Gale's face slightly changed, but did not say anything. He knew that this was her magic mark ability. "Both of you should go around and carefully search for clues," Woman ordered in cold tone. Chapter 77. The Dark King, Chapter 77. Letter. Basement of the castle. Dudien and Rest took their time to rest after the doctors left. After all, last 10 days were full of tension and they didn't have time to sleep properly. At the moment, all of them were completely relaxed within the cage and soon sounds of snores echoed out. Dudien did not immediately fall asleep but gently stroked the magic marks on his chest. He could feel his touch clearly. He just didn't know the feeling spread from his fingertips to his brain or from the magic marks. As he touched the magic marks which looked like frozen blood veins, he felt a cool feeling enveloping his body. His heart began to beat faster. This magic marks, if they are destroyed, my life also should be under a great threat. I might even die. Dudien quietly thought. He would have never ever thought that his life will be linked to a magic mark. Damn it. I share my life with worms. He lay in bed, turned around but did not fall asleep. Suddenly he caught a glimpse of Book of Light which was on the small table. He took and gently opened it. He squinted his eyes. Light is the truth. Because of the light plants can grow. Because of the light we can see. Light gives life to people. The creator of light and life, God of light, the Father will shelter all those who devoted. The few axioms in the beginning were the core of the code. Moreover, there were few light stories in each passage. They were related to the phenomenons that everybody knew. As everybody took them at face value, no one tried to even refute them. Role of light was too big on life, but Dudien felt that the book wasn't enough to explain everything about life. The role of light. If there is no light, there won't be any life on Earth. They wrote tons of examples such as this. However, Dudien had a better understanding about science, life and creation, so he wasn't going to believe in the God of life. Of course, the role of light couldn't be ignored, but what does Holy Church aims to do? Dudien scribbled and flipped through the book. By the end he generally understood how they recruited believers. All what they did was to put some natural phenomena known to all and form their teachings around it. The people were ignorant about many things, so they would take their words at face value and be convinced. If the person who read it didn't have a sound and strong personality, then they would be lost in confusion. They would just blindly follow what the Holy Church would say. Once a blind and a devout believer, then their reality will be dictated by the Holy Church. There is no scientific basis to any of their explanations. It's all formed on the appearance. Just like the Father had told me before. The ancients had intelligence but lacked the tools. They knew the results but didn't know the reasons. Same is happening in here now. Dudien secretly said, if they had the right tools they could see the origins of many things. Father often said ignorant claims by faithful were made because of backwardness of science and technology. As science wasn't able to explain, the faithful began to speculate. Dudien was convinced by his father's words. Moreover, he increasingly determined to choose the alchemist path. 3 days period of cleaning passed. Both doctors came up every day to observe and check the physical condition of Dudien and the others. In fact, an infected person would have some symptoms, but there were few tenacious people who would carefully hide their scars and tolerate until the last moment. However, still on the 3rd day the outbreak would occur. But there were few examples like that. Dudien's new clothing was according to his size and was very fit. Basement's door opened as they were taken out. Please, please. A guard from church guided everyone. Dudien and the rest didn't see the Knight of Light who had received them at arrival. When they were about to exit the gate, Dudien heard a voice calling out, Mr. Dean. Who is Mr. Dean? Dudien looked surprised. A middle-aged gentleman with a black cap and walking cane was calling out his name. Scott, who was walking down the side, smiled and said, that's him. The middle-aged gentleman was surprised as he didn't expect that he would be sent here as a messenger specifically for a boy. But he didn't neglect his job and quietly stepped forward. He took out an envelope from the chest side of his shirt. Mr. Dean, this letter is for you. Dudien looked at stamp and address engraved on the envelope. Mellon Foundation, Scavenger Headquarters. He understood that doctors had informed them about the magic marks. He nodded and said thank you. He opened it. The content was very simple, come to the top office in the headquarters and find me, the top. Dudien naturally understood what it meant to be top level. They had to deal with the highest secrecy of scavengers. It's about nominating you as a hunter, and the headquarters is really swift. Scott smiled, congratulations. Maybe the next time I'll meet you in the wilderness. Mia, who was next to him, was stunned as she heard him talk. What? Hunter? Dean. Scott laughed. You do not know it yet, but there are magic marks on Dean. He is going to be a hunter. Mia stared at Dudien in daze. Dudien smiled and said to Scott, I have to thank you all for your guidance. Scott. Scott replied and smiled. He was happy in his heart as he knew that Dudien had a positive impression of him. I will go with Mia. After a few days, the price of the materials will be assessed by the headquarters. You should go and gather then. Dudien was surprised. The prices of materials have not been assessed yet. But to think of those things, the materials that they have gathered are modern goods. Uses of many things are not known to people inside the wall. It should take time to assess their prices. Watching Scott and Mia leave, Mason and the other two also bid farewell with Dudien. They together went into the carriage provided by the consortium. The other 3 consortium scavengers and the new boy also spoke with Dudien before leaving. Dudien put away the envelope as he was sent to headquarters in an exclusive carriage only for him. Chapter 78. The Dark King, Chapter 78. Meeting. Mellon Foundation, Scavenger Headquarters. The carriage stopped before the door of the headquarters. Dudien went down from the carriage and looked up at this huge building. Step by step he went along the stairs and came to the front of the entrance hall. It was extremely spacious inside. There were several consortium scavengers who were in front of a billboard inside the hall, looking out for the latest information. This bulletin was dedicated to the latest information picked up about the outside world. It was required for scavengers to check them out before going on to missions. There were details about the changes within the areas under the control of Mellon Consortium or the other regions in the vicinity. Dudien randomly glanced at the bulletin. There was an information that caught his eyes. Area number 8 is infested with undeads. Temporary blockade. Scavengers should not enter. Dudien knew that in addition to occasional tasks specified by the consortium, scavengers were free to go and search any area under the control of Mellon Foundation. In short, the choice of areas was unrestricted. Therefore most of the scavengers before each trip would come over here to get the latest information about the changes in various areas. It was for them to avoid danger. Even though these areas have been cleaned, but undeads and beasts don't follow the rules set by consortiums. Often they break and barge into areas which have cleaned before. Dudien had survived one occasion such as that. Dudien didn't stay for long and went down the hall through the corridor towards the stairs. Hey, Dean. Suddenly a voice came. Dudien looked sideways. It was Peter who was holding a cup of hot coffee. It seemed he just got out of his office. Mr. Peter. The materials that you have picked up haven't been estimated. How come you are here? Peter was perplexed. Dudien was also stunned. Haven't they heard about him yet? All of a sudden he understood that he shouldn't tell them about his newly acquired identity as the top management haven't revealed it yet. As he saw that Peter was not aware of the situation, so he euphemistically avoided the topic. I've been ordered to come over. I'm not sure about the details, so. Peter froze a moment as he suddenly thought of something. He wrinkled his brows and said to himself, should not be, even as a suspect. They are just recruited. He was puzzled. He spoke in a hesitant tone, I reckon I was looking for you. I've heard about the area number 8. Few days ago news of Hunter's death came from the Hunter headquarters. They are going to thoroughly investigate your group who was in the area number 8. But there is no reason to suspect the new graduates, so do not be worried too much. Dudien hesitated for a moment as all the hair on his body was erect. As if he had encountered danger, and it was kind of an instinctive alert. Soon he found himself reacting way too much to Peter's words, so he quickly restored himself. I wondered why. Thanks, Mr. Peter. Peter smiled and said, I have my hopes on you and expect great results. So don't slack and make great efforts. Then, carrying hot coffee, he left away. Dudien slowly turned after Peter departed. The smile on his face has disappeared and was replaced with coldness. He slightly narrowed his eyes as he thought, Hunter headquarters should investigate the area number 8 to find traces and clues. I didn't expect them to expand the scope of investigation to include the scavengers who had been in the area. Although he was not afraid, but such a big reaction from Hunter headquarters meant that they dealt with this matter very seriously. He quickly remembered the traces of his treatment and thought of an issue. With a magic mark, all the hunters get an ability. So are there any other hunters with keen sense of smell as himself? Thinking of this, his fingers clenched into a fist. He made up his mind. Even all the hands pointed at him after the investigation, he would deny his involvement at all times. He looked at stairs as his calm expression was restored. Step by step he walked up. Scavenger headquarters had 4 layers. Each was protected by the guards provided by the noble families belonging to Melon Consortium. Only nobility had the right to recruit private armed forces, but the quota was limited. That's why different families belonging to Consortium divided resources accordingly to their sizes and came up with basic requirements to protect Consortium's assets. The 4th floor was designed as a cloister. There were too many rooms on the corridor, so Dudien was a bit lost. He thought of the attendants by the staircase, so he went back to them and asked the direction towards Mr. Dayton's office. Under their guidance he come to the front of a large red-colored door. He gently knocked on the door. The door opened. A middle-aged man looked up and down at Dudien. He smiled. "You should be Dean." The newly recruited scavenger who joined the consortium. "Please enter." Dudien nodded and entered the room. The room had splendid lighting system. A sweet aroma floated on every corner of the room. As he stepped inside, he felt extremely soft carpet under his feet. He quickly and accurately glanced at the room. All the tables, chairs, sofa, desk and oil paintings gave a pressing aura and atmosphere of elegance and wealth. He sighed at the luxury of the room. What caught his eyes were the painting at the top of the room. It was of a huge painting of a woman and a man with strong physique. The most eye-catching thing was that on man's chin side close to his neck there was finger-long deep scar. The scar's location was shocking. If it deviated half a centimeters more, perhaps the carotid artery would be cut. "Little guy, come to sit." Middle-aged man looked at Dudien. Dudien saw his mild attitude, so he knew that he wasn't going to be questioned about the hunter's death. He was relieved as he sat down in a couch opposite to Mr. Dayton. "I read your resume. Before the task your radiation value was only 0.8, less than 1. Dayton gently opened the book on his desktop. "However, this time as you had come from the outside, normally your body's radiation value had to go up. But in your case its radiation value was reduced to 0.1. Little guy, do you know that only hunters have that kind of a radiation value?" Dudien nodded slightly, not unexpected. "So, you have magic marks. That's why it's not surprising to have such a low value. Now, I'd like to know where is your magic marks." Dayton smiled slightly, but slowly narrowed his eyes, as if examining every minor change in Dudien's face. Chapter 79. Chapter 79, Crystallization of the Soul. This phrase is mentioned a lot in the series. The actual meaning of the translation of the phrase is, fearing those who have been contaminated after death. The closest meaning in English should be the word zombie. But zombie refers to a fictional undead created through the reanimation of the human corpse. So I went with the first best choice that came to my mind, which is using pinyin. We have Juranzi, which includes undeads and zombies of all kinds. Yeah, I know it sounds like Jumanji. Dudien had prepared standard answers for this case, so he followed the previous rhetoric question. "I'm not aware of it myself. I was in coma. I woke up and it was here." Coma. Dayton was interested. "How come?" Dudien was calm on the surface. But ideas rapidly rotated in his mind. To detailed question he was going to answer with a simple sentence, "I don't know." But he heard from Peter that Hunter have investigated the area number 8. He knew that all the hunters has some kind of strange ability. Although he had burned Hunter's corpse, he wasn't sure that he hasn't left any traces that would lead back and expose him. Moreover, a hunter died and another popped out. Both of it were big things and it was easy to associate with each other. Dudien changed his mind as he thought of these issues. "I saw a hunter fight with a beast. I was scared. I could understand the power of Hunter. But that beast. It was huge and ferocious." He clenched his teeth and his body slight shivered. He acted as if he was still scared of the beast. Dayton looked at Dudien's trembling legs under the tea table, his eyes showing a bit pondering. The process only lasted for a few seconds as Dayton quickly withdrew his eyes and looked at the book. That beast was a level 9 Juranzi. It was born out of a parasitic soul worm. In fact, your magic marks should be result of the infection by the parasitic worm. Jiranzi. Dudien muttered the name of the beast who he had killed. He was a bit surprised and about to ask directly when suddenly was alerted by the mistake that he going to make. You said that a parasitic soul worm, it entered my body. Then I will. Dayton raised his head and smiled. Do not worry. I said that the magic marks result after the soul worm enters your body. But after it drills into your body it dies. It's just dead. However, it's linked to your body. Don't forget magic mark is a deadly location. It is as important as your head and heart. Remember to protect it in the future and for the best don't reveal the location of your magic marks to anyone else. Dudien was pleased. He was worried that the worm would take over at some point. It was good to know that it was dead. At the same time, as he understood from Dayton's words, everyone has different magic marks on different positions. His was on his chest while the other hunters have in different parts. Originally, the headquarters intended to look at your performance. If your performance was good, so in another 2 years, you would be able to get a lot of money and there would be a chance for you to study at Hunter Academy. Then you would be qualified to buy a parasite which would truly qualify you as a hunter's. Unexpectedly, you have turned into a hunter ahead of time. Actually, it saved headquarters a lot funds that they were going to spend to buy a parasitic soul bug. Moreover, you may not know but magic marks from Jiranzi is very rare. I believe that most of the other hunters would be very jealous of you. Dudien said, I would have to thank the consortium for training me anyway. By the way, Mr. Day, you said that the consortium buys parasitic soul bug. From where? This parasite takes the monster's soul as food. Dayton did not mind to explain to Dudien. Generally they will give special power to the monster but at the same time they will die. That's why the hunters can't transfer their powers between each other. Although the consortium has the ability to capture the infected monster, but there is no way to find the parasitic soul worms. Unless you will directly feed on the monster, that is. But the monster is not allowed back to the well, so the only way to get them is to buy from the Holy Church. God of Light have bestowed them with a cradle which can save the living parasitic soul worm, but the price is extremely expensive. No wonder, Holy Church as a religious organization was able to recruit large number of guards and knights. Even all the consortia had to give them face. In addition to the original faith, they have strong grasp on many things. This is a secret. Your status as a hunter is not publicly available yet, so even others in our headquarters are not aware of it. Dayton smiled and said, this is to protect you. I hope you do not wantonly share it in public. The headquarters there will soon send someone over to confirm your identity. Afterwards you will be able to apply for identity procedures. Dudien nodded slightly. In addition to protecting Dudien, the real purpose was to protect the news from other consortiums. Oh, there is one thing. Dayton suddenly spoke up, you have submitted 7 soul crystals which are commonly known as cold crystals. The price of each piece is a gold coin. Although your identity is not public yet, but this is in accordance with the proportion given to hunters. If you were a scavenger, then you would only get 1 silver coin for each soul crystal. Dudien referred to them as dark blue balls. However, he was speechless in his heart. The difference in proportion between scavengers and hunters was about 10 times. He was a seed recruit and had 30% proportion. So the hunters had 300% more income than a scavenger. Dayton smiled as he saw Dudien's surprised expression. Anyway, you have to go Hunter headquarters. I'm going to be straight with you. The scavengers pay 50% of the consignment as transportation fees to the consortium. Moreover, cost of material identification, taxes, and the other fees are deducted from the rest of the 50%. So the amount that is left to scavengers is not much. Dudien was stunned. He could not help but secretly sigh. Consortium was ruthless when it came to making money. Scavengers would go through dire situations, face radiation and life-threatening monsters to find materials and bring back to Consortium. At the end they would be assigned with very small part of the overall result. By telling them that they could get a lot profits, was nothing but lie. They were being swindled. Businessman with real power never trade but rob. Dudien felt after hearing all the details. What is the crystallization of the soul? Dudien asked curiously. Chapter 80. The Dark King. Chapter 80. Jiranzi. This is confidential. Dayton faintly smiled. However, as the one with the qualifications of a hunter I can disclose to you a thing or two. The raw materials for the God's blessing are taken from these crystals for enhancement of the physical strength. The human who is infected would have her soul crystallized because of the resentment. As a result, a degenerate undead or monster is made up. Dudien was confused a bit. He remembered that after he was branded with the magic marks while he was in coma, he was able to absorb the soul crystal and it didn't hurt. Was the magic mark the real reason? Even hunters cannot use them directly, asked Dudien. Dayton shook his head. Cannot. Dudien was shocked as his heartbeat rapidly increased. Hunters can't use the soul crystals. But he can, At least, he absorbed the melting dark blue ball. He hasn't felt any strangeness in his body. If there was, it would have to show itself during the cleaning days. Both of the doctors should have detected the signs of infection, as they must be experienced. Magic marks. Hunters' magic marks are different, so they have different abilities. An idea popped up in Dudien's mind. I thought that my magic mark's real ability was super smell. But it seems it is to digest the cold crystals. Or is digestion of cold crystals is only one of the characteristics? He was excited because if his speculation was true, then he could secretly absorb the power from cold crystals. Although a cold crystal is equal to a gold coin, which is 10,000 copper coins, but power was power. You can go to the Ministry of Finance and receive your 7 gold coins after you produce your identity card. As for the other materials, after they are inspected and identified in the Temple of Elements, you will get your share. It will usually take about a month at least, maybe even a month. Dayton smiled. Dudien asked in curiosity, Temple of Elements. Dayton smiled but did not elaborate. People from the headquarters should be coming soon. You go and wait outside. Dudien saw that he did not say much, but also that didn't force for it. He got up and said, Thank you, Mr. Dayton, then I will leave. Okay. After Dudien left the room, Dayton looked at the middle-aged butler next to him and asked with a light laugh, What do you think? Very smart, great potential for a little guy, the middle-aged housekeeper said respectfully. Dayton slightly nodded, sighed, said, Yes. Unfortunately, after all, he doesn't have a light physique. His life is limited and the price of that thing is too expensive. Unless the top hunter, he won't have enough capital to buy a little. Unfortunately, middle-aged housekeeper nodded. Dayton gently tapped the pen in his hand on the desktop and spoke out, the hunter who died in area number 8. This little guy must know the truth. But he didn't say anything and we cannot torture the truth out of him. Even the hunter's headquarters would not be reluctant to use torture. After all, there has been a loss of hunter and there is a rare new replacement. Moreover, it has magic marks from a rare level 9 Juranzi. They should leave him alone. Middle-aged housekeeper nodded slightly, said, the kid said that he had burned the Juranzi's body to death. He spoke a little bit in nervous tone, but his eyes were calm. There is no way to disguise it, I suspect, he really burned it to death. He nodded slightly, which he naturally saw. Although Dudien disguised well, but his ability to know people is still extremely sensitive. Mellon Foundation, Hunter Headquarters. An office in the castle. Bang. A slender white palm shot onto the table. The owner of the palm is the red-head woman with the scarlet armor. She angrily stared at the bald middle-aged man behind the ask. She almost growled, My brother. My family. There are so many things unclear about my brother's death. I have checked and there is a recently recruited new hunter in Huazheng Consortium. I just want our consortium to pull few strings. I want to go and ask few questions. Bald middle-aged looked calm. She was spitting at his face as she screaming around. He didn't even rub his face but quietly said, You should be clear, we have no evidence. Even if their hunters secretly sneaked in, we have nothing to blame on them. You have yourself found the remains of his armor in Juranzi's stomach. His body has been digested with only small residue left. I know that you are angry because your brother has died. But the beast who killed your brother is already dead. What do you want to do? I want to take revenge. Scarlet-armored woman growled, Even if my brother was killed by the beast, I will not allow others to pick up my brother's results. There was no parasitic soul worm next to the beast. There had to be someone else close by. My brother died in vain and somebody else gains the loot. I won't allow it. Bald middle-aged replied in calm tone, I can understand that you cannot accept. But to harm the interests of the consortium, I will not allow. You better not have any little tricks, the consortium will investigate everything clearly and you will get a proper explanation too. I hurt the interests of the consortium. Scarlet-armored woman could not help but laugh. Tears came out as she spoke, my brother is dead. You tell me, in these years how much interest have he brought to the consortium? Do you think I don't know? Bald middle-aged man knew that he shouldn't have said so. A slip of tongue. He slightly frowned. I said, the consortium will give you a satisfactory account. If we find that person and confirm that they belong to other consortium, we will never let this go. You can rest assured, but you cannot go on take action on your own. If caught by the other consortium, you will suffer a major loss. The woman stopped laughing, looked at him mockingly, did not say anything and turned to leave. At this point, the door of the room was suddenly opened. A guard trot in. He saluted the woman in a respectful manner and then came towards the bald middle-aged man and said, Your Honor. This is the news from scavenger headquarters. Bald middle-aged frowned, but still tore the envelope apart and skimmed through the content. Middle-aged man was slightly stunned. He looked at woman's back and saw that she didn't notice it. He was slightly relieved as he quickly closed the envelope and told, You should go now. Even though there was quite a distance, but the woman had heard guard's words. A murderous intention flashed by her eyes as she strode out of the room. As the woman left, the middle-aged man wrote a new letter and quickly released the order. Chapter 81. The Dark King, Chapter 81. Conflict. Dudien went down to first floor of the scavenger headquarters to find the finance department to receive the 7 gold coins. The 7 gold coins was worth 10 years of savings of an ordinary family which lived in residential district. Even Jura, who had a high-paying job, was paid a total of only 5 or 6 silver coins as monthly salary. A gold coin was equal to $10,000 from the old era's currency. But in this era the salary of the middle class was very low. Dudien would be rich according to today's standards. And this was just a small part of his scavenging. Dudien was filled with emotion as he held the heavy and smooth gold. But he was not excited at all. After all, he earned it in a sense in exchange for his life. Moreover, if not because of his hunter identity, he could only get 7 silver coins. Therefore, if the scavenger wanted to get rich still, she had to rely on luck to pick special items while searching for the materials. I don't know how much the others thing that I have brought back will amount to. Dudien secretly thought. Although 7 gold coins would be an amazing amount for the residential district standards, but if he wants to run an alchemy lab, this kind of money won't satisfy his appetite. As he took the gold coins, he came to sit in the hall. It didn't take long before a stir of sounds occurred in the hall. Dudien looked up and saw a tall figure. A woman who was wearing a scarlet armor pushed the door of the hall and walked in with big steps. Dudien glimpsed over the silver medal hanging on her shoulder. 3 years ago he had seen the same medal on Fernando. However, Fernando's was copper while the one she had was silver with 2 eagles engraved on it. The staff in the hall and the consortium scavengers who were present also noted the medal on woman's shoulder. After all, her armor was too eye-catching. It was as if blood flowing down through her body. It was totally different from scavenger's soft armor and easily attracted attention. It's a hunter. The people in the hall suddenly quieted down as they were carefully watching the woman. Let the person in charge to come out here now. Scarlet-armored woman stood in the middle of the hall, shouted out. 2 girls who were responsible for the reception looked nervous. One of them hastily promised the scarlet-armored woman while the other trot into the next room. Soon, Peter and another old steward came out. They saw the medal on her shoulder. Peter's face instantly changed. He bent forward and respectfully said, Welcome, hunter. Would you mind telling us the reason of your visit? She lifted her hand and interrupted his speech, the scavengers who had been to the area number 8. Call the out now. Peter and the lean old man were surprised. They looked at each other and caught the meaning in their eyes. Peter respectfully said, Honorable hunter, they are gone back to their homes. We need some time to gather them. The woman said in a cold tone, Do not dawdle in front of me. I'll see them before the sunset today. You wait. Peter was covered in cold sweat. Yes, absolutely cannot delay. The woman caught the Dudien in the periphery as he was resting in the sofa. Her eyebrows lifted as she saw him drink the milk tea. Peter also detected her vision and noted Dudien. He hastened forward and screamed, "Boy, haven't you noticed the honorable hunter? Are you stunned? Why haven't you saluted her yet? Do it and get out." Dudien saw a hint of anxiousness in his eyes. He immediately understood that Peter is trying to support him. According to woman's words, the hunter who died in area number 8 is somehow related to her. He frowned slightly as he did not expect the trouble to be so fast in finding him. But he didn't worry about anything as he nodded towards the woman, then got up and was ready to leave. And so on. Woman looked cold at him, said, "Are you a new scavenger?" Dudien paused, looking back at her, "Yes." "So," woman squinted her eyes, "have you been to area number 8? Dudien looked at her eyes. There was cold chill concentrated in her eyes. As long as he would nod, she would immediately shot and kill him without a slight frown. There was a bit of resentment in his eyes as he said, "Yes." Her original brown-gray eyes became somewhat dark red as she spoke in cold tone, "Why? Why didn't you die? A garbage like you survives. Why? Why death hasn't taken you?" Her skin color on the arms became a bit crimson as if congested. Peter, who saw the scene, hurriedly said, "Honorable Hunter, Dean is our seed object. The headquarters pay a special attention to his cultivation because he may become a hunter in the future. Please do not be offended with him. If he has offended you anyhow, I'm sure if you give him the chance for an apology." "Scroll!" Woman roared back. Peter was stunned. Woman stood up as her eyes were staring at Dudien. Actually, she had never left him from her vision. Her eyes were full of resentment, anger, and sadness. Dudien thought she was investigating the evidences. He didn't think that she was seeking for a person to vent her anger on. He saw the strange expression in her eyes. He couldn't help as his heart was moved as he asked, "The hunter who died in the area number 8. What is his relation to you?" "Shut up." Scarlet Woman angrily raised her hand to beat over. Dudien's face slightly changed as he quickly hurried back his body. He escaped the palm in matter of a breath. He quickly stepped back a few steps to open up a distance. Once again they stared at each other. He knew that if an ordinary scavenger was here they would long be dead because of the palm attack. At least they would be seriously injured. He was very clear that without the power of the hunter, he would face the same fate. Peter saw the other's palm attack and was scared. However, when saw Dudien escape, he was speechless. Woman was also startled a bit. She looked up at Dudien as the grief in her eyes turned into coldness. "You are a new scavenger. Even if you were blessed 20 times, or even 30 times, you wouldn't be able to react at such a rate. What are you?" Dudien's eyes become cold. Although the woman acted because of her grief, but the palm attack was not concerned about its severity that could cause. Perhaps in her eyes, even accidentally killing a scavenger would only result in few criticisms. Maybe the consortium will take the initiative to shelter her or help her eliminate the evidence and confession to avoid the trial of ruling. She knew that there won't be punishment even if she murdered someone. "Today, this slap, I will write it down," Dudien said, staring at her. "The others give me a good, I will pay 10 times. They give me a pain, I will retaliate 100 times. Ah." Woman's face turned as cold as ice. "Alone, you dare to threaten me." Chapter 82. The Dark King, Chapter 82. Appointment. The chapter where Dudien runs up the building to avoid the beast. If you guys remember when he was on 4th floor, Dudien says that the beast have detected the hunter's body. That's when the beast eats Brian. In chapter where Gail, Linda, and the other youth find the corpse of the beast. She cuts its body and finds bones and metals. Those were what was left of Brian. Last chapter, as Linda leaves the room in Hunter HQ, the man writes down an order. This chapter basically is the result of that order. Enjoy. By the way, we appreciate each and every comment. Even if it is a single thank you, which is very dear to us. Stop. A voice echoed out. Suddenly a burly figure appeared between the scarlet-armored woman and Dudien. His hand instantly touched woman's thigh to stop her using a kick to Dudien. As his hand blocked the attack, the burly figure's face slightly changed because of the power of attack. He made 2 steps backwards as he resisted the momentum. The woman also fell to the ground as she was repelled by the men. She coldly looked at the burly figure blocking her sight. "Bud. Don't stop me." Bud slightly frowned and said, "You should stop, Linda. Dean is the new hunter of our consortium. I'm here on behalf of the hunter headquarters to appoint him and give him his medal." Woman's eyes widened in shock because of Bud's words. Peter and the old man besides him were stunned at the news. Dudien looked at the burly men. If it was not for him, the only way for him was to avoid the strike and run outside to the street in order to escape the crazy woman. New hunter. Woman thought of something as her face darkened. Her dark brown eyes completely turned into dark red. Dark red blood vessels which looked like veins on her arms began to twitch as she ferociously said, "So he is the one who picked up. I know you are sad because of your brother's death. But I hope you do not make a mistake by attacking the hunter who belongs to the same consortium as us. I hope you are aware how serious the consequences would be. Don't destroy your future." Woman seemed not care about Bud's words, instead stared at Dudien. "You were there when the monster ate my brother. Why it didn't eat you? Why? You are a scavenger. What qualifications do you have to possess magic marks?" Dudien looked at her indifferently but did not speak. Woman stared at Dudien, but after a moment killing intent had disappeared from her face. The blood vessels that had appeared on her arms gradually hid under her skin. She licked her lips and said, "Little thing. You said you will retaliate with 100 times more. Right." But who saw the change in Linda was relieved. If she recklessly rushed to attack Dudien, he may not be able to block. He turned to Dudien and said, "You are called Dean, aren't you? Apologize to Linda and everything will stay behind. Moreover, you are potential companions in future tasks. Why should we be more friendly and pleasant towards each other?" Dudien frowned. Intuition told him that this woman will not stop at anything. She just temporarily held back her intention to kill because of taking into the account the consequences of killing a fellow hunter. Even if he apologized, nothing will change. Most importantly, why did he have to apologize? Just because your brother died, do you think you can go around and freely vent your anger on others? Even if it's about revenge. Your brother was the one who took the initiative to harm us. Would we be allowed to fight back? I don't care about apology. However, you are welcome to come to retaliate me at any time." Woman spoke in a feminine tone as if she was not the rogue from minutes ago. Dudien's face was cold as he spoke indifferently. "I didn't know that the hunter who was eaten by the beast was your brother. No wonder you are so angry. I can understand that. After all, his death was not just ugly but also miserable." Linda's eyes suddenly turned cold. Her fingers clenched into a fist as the sounds of bones creaking echoed out. Eventually she released her fist and headed back to leave the hall. She quickly disappeared from sight as she went into the crowd. But Riley smiled as he looked back at Dudien. "Little brother, you can really talk. I'm far too weak in comparison to her. She wants to talk with her hands while I can only use my mouth." Dudien was calm as he replied to Bud. Bud sighed. "You shouldn't blame her. Her parents died young, so they had only each other. After she got to know that her brother died, it's normal for her to have mood disorders." Dudien looked at him strangely and said, "There are lots of orphans who have lost their relatives. Do they have to go and freely vent their anger on innocent people? Her brother was eaten by the beast and she doesn't want to vent her anger on the beasts but instead finds weak scavengers to harm. Isn't life of the scavenger a life? Can she go around insulting everyone in here just because scavenger's identity is not as high as her? Moreover, after being insulted, we should also sympathize with her because of her loss." Bud could not help but be speechless. Bud slightly shook his head as he didn't want to continue to talk about this issue. There was a trace of smile on his face as he said, "Speaking of which, you are not scavenger anymore. It was requested by the headquarters for me to give your contract and medals." Dudien nodded slightly. He also no longer said anything about the issue, but in his heart he had already taken note of the woman. It will not end. She is bound by the rules of the consortium, so she may not directly harm him. But secretly she could. Maybe she could find someone else to do it instead of her. He didn't like to wait for others to take the initiative to harm himself, so he was going to retaliate at the first possible chance. "This is the hunter contract. After you sign it, you will be an official hunter of the consortium. Bud took out a document from the bag and handed it to Dudien. Dudien temporarily put away the plan in his mind. He carefully read through the hunter contract. It was roughly same with the scavenger contract. The only thing that has changed is the welfare and the implementation of the tasks. Hunters are free to reside in the commercial district. Moreover, they will be provided a real estate and license for it for free. However, according to the contract, they don't have the right to inherit the real estate license. The house will return to consortium's possession if the hunter was killed on mission. In addition, each month he will receive 10 blessings. He was a seed from the training camp, but he could only get a blessing once a month. But this treatment was 10 times better. It was surprisingly high. Hunters can enjoy a discount of 30% in all industries under the consortium. It was the equivalent of VIP class privileges. The industries where Melon Consortium was involved ranged from coal mines, real estates, hotels, slaves, transport, chain stores to many others. So this discount was not a small benefit. Dudien read through the article. After the welfare part, he checked other restrictive terms and determined that there was not much that could restrain his plans. Moreover, unless his signed, nothing will be official. This is your hunter medal. Bud handed Dudien a bronze medal with a falcon engraved on it. Dudien took a look and asked, she had a silver medal. What was its significance? Bud smiled and said, it seems you are quite careful. She recently became an intermediate level hunter as she reached bloody swordsman level. We commonly refer to them as silver hunters. In the execution of the missions, the captain of the team has to be at least a silver-ranked hunter. Dudien slightly frowned. If he was assigned together with this woman in the next task, it is going to be very dangerous. This is the hunter's manual, you should check it later on. It has everything related to hunters, but remember not to show it to non-hunter personnel. In addition, if your medal is lost, be sure to find headquarters to apply for the replacement. Bud handed out a small book. Dudien reached over and nodded, I know. Chapter 83. The Dark King, Chapter 83. 4 major occupations. You have 7 days to adjust and rest. Bud smiled and said, 7 days later you have to go and report to the headquarters. Although you have magic marks, but you lack too much in other areas. Hunters have different positions. Specifics about each occupation is written inside. Consider on your own in those 7 days what do you want to be. Dudien thought about the word bloody swordsman said by Bud earlier on. His heart moved as he nodded, said, I know. In addition, I suggest you better live in the commercial district. The hunters are sometimes called out in emergency situations, so it's efficient to get them when we know where they are. For example, if we detect the presence of a Jiranzi, then we immediately need to dispatch hunters to prevent it from running away. So most of the time hunters are usually in the commercial district on standby. Dudien nodded as he understood what Bud meant. Moreover, the radiation content in the commercial district is better than the residential district. Nevertheless, he would have to take Jura couple with him to live in the commercial district in a sense to return their adoption grace. If there is no other thing, then I'll go first. Bud smiled. Dudien greeted him and watched him leave the hall. He looked at the brochures and medals in his hand. It seems he would get his hunter armor after 7 days when he would report to hunter headquarters. It was not urgent anyway. Peter and the other old men closed the gap between themselves and Dudien. They closely looked at the genuine hunter medal in Dudien's hands. However, they still couldn't believe that he had been appointed as a hunter. Nevertheless, both of them had been working in scavenger headquarters for a long time and their eyes were extremely sharp. Through the previous conversation between Bud and Dudien, performance of Linda, combined with the news that they had, more or less they have guessed the reasons of the matter. Dean, Peter smiled in an unnatural way, I did not expect you to be a hunter, congratulations. Congratulations. Lean Oldman also complimented. Dudien smiled, it's because you have cultivated me well. I will not forget the care that both of you had shown to me. It's nothing. Peter waved his hand quickly, said, it's because of your own efforts that you have accomplished the position. I thought it would take few years for you to have an opportunity to become a hunter. I didn't expect it to be so fast. Indeed, the seed of the camp. Powerful and smart. Lean old man's voice echoed out. Dudien observed the unnatural actions displayed by both of them. The change in his identity had influenced the other's communication style with him way too much. However, he knew that it was not good to act impolite towards others because of his status. These people have been in this business most of their lives. Dudian understood the terrible influence of the system upon the individuals. He secretly sighed in his heart. He saw the brutality outside the wall. It was also very difficult to integrate into the consortium. It was the sole reason why previously he didn't want to bow his head in front of the scarlet armor-wearing woman. Instead, he released all the anger inside of him and spoke out. First, he knew that bowing is useless. Second, he knew that he didn't want to. Moreover, he has seen the fragility of life and won't tolerate other people bullying him. Perhaps, the woman hunter's character and hostility were same as her brother's, which made him to stand on his own. I have something to do first, Dudian said to Peter and the old man. I'll come back to see you guys when I have free time. And, I have 3 good friends who are scavengers. I would like to trouble you by taking care of them. Give their names to me. Peter grinned. Dudian nodded slightly and waited for them to take the leave first before going out of the hall. The others in the hall were envious and jealous. They knew that Dudian would live in a world which they could never ever reach to. I should get back home. Dudian called to a carriage which was docked near the headquarters and went back to the residential district. On the way back, as he sat in the carriage, he read the thin booklet that was given to him. Information was divided into several chapters. The first chapter was about the purpose and responsibilities of the hunters, which Dudian naturally know. In simple terms, the only role that they had was to hunt monsters outside the wall. The second chapter was all about the types of hunters, the occupations and details about their roles. The 4 occupations were respectively knight, warrior, scout and archer. All 4 positions were responsible for different jobs, and hunters were focused more on team action. When it came to hunting monster, whether it was efficiency or safety was maximized. Knights and warriors are responsible for attracting and attacking monsters from the front. Scouts were responsible of detecting and gathering information about the surrounding environment. Archers were responsible for long-range attacks and support. It's like modern warfare. There is infantry who is responsible for the direct confrontation on the ground. And there are supportive forces such as surprise air attacks or artillery like long-range strikes. It didn't matter whether it was a large-scale combat or a small group operation, there were 3 aspects that had to be followed. They were intelligence gathering, direct confrontation, and long-range support. These were basic occupations that had to be chosen by the newly appointed hunters. However, as they gather more experience and become proficient in the occupation, they will have to pass an advanced examination. Likewise, they will step up and become intermediate-level silver hunters. While at it, they will be able to reselect a different expertise. Knights advance to shielded knights, animal knights, etc. The swordsman also had shielded swordsman and combat swordsman. Previous woman was referred to as Bloody Swordsman because after advancing she had combined her ability with the title. In fact, she should belong to Combat Swordsman category. Dudian knew that the hunter whom he had killed earlier belonged to Archer category. He most probably was responsible for tracking the enemy and long-range attacks. In the long run, there had been a systematic distribution while developing the hunter teams, so that interests and efficiency could be maxed up. After all, individuals' energy is limited. If everyone in the team specialized in the same category, then they wouldn't be effective in fights against a group of stronger monsters. But let me to consider, so I've to decide on a position in advance. Dudian thought, knight and warriors are good at close combat, but the number of monsters outside the giant wall stronger than a hunter is just way too much. If they are caught in a disadvantage, they have to rely on remote hunters' cooperation to overcome the problem. Scouts are mainly focused on traps and assassinations. They would be the weakest link in the group. I have already created bombs which are my secret weapons. However, as I am not strong enough, I can't reveal bombs in front of the others. So the best for me is to choose a position which shall grant me individual space where I won't be in contact with the rest of the team as much as possible. Only scouts and archers satisfy the main condition. They are more independent in comparison to the other hunters. As long as I can use the environment to my advantage, I can kill any monster on my own. Just like the previous hunter who tried to use us, scavengers, as a bait to lure the monster and finish it. Thinking through the details, Dudian made up his mind that he was going to be an archer. Moreover, he could come up with and develop new ideas and tactics to be used in hunting, using the knowledge of the gunpowder. If he could add lead powder to the top of the arrow, wouldn't it be several times more lethal? Part 5 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.